Welcome to Season 2 of Malevolent Autopsy. I'm your host, Queen. I use she, her pronouns. And before we go any further than that, let me warn you, this show contains major spoilers for everything in Malevolent as of the date this episode is published. We're going to dissect the patron votes that drive the story week to week, so grab your scalpel and let's begin the Autopsy Part 2. This is a continuation of the last episode. So I'm here tonight with the wonderful and amazing Nicky.
Hello.
Nicky, would you like to introduce yourself and tell me what part of Arthur's body you control?
Sure. So I am Nicky. I am here and there around the server and a big fan of Invictus and its related lore. I go by any pronouns. I also am trying out some neo-pronouns lately. as. And I am today controlling just a random cluster of hair follicles in, I'd say, the back right corner of Arthur's head.
I appreciate that. I appreciate a good hair follicle moment. I mean, I think people forget.
They get chopped, but they keep coming.
Yeah. Bloody but unbowed. That's the hair follicle.
There we go. The spirit of this evening's conversation.
Yes. So we're going to skip the chapter summary because we have already done one in our last episode, and we're going to just roll right into talking about the other side of the vote. Now, I brought Nicky on because Nicky was a Lilith voter, and Vol and I were both Cain voters, and we wanted to make sure that we got a fair perspective, because I'm pretty convinced right now that choosing Lilith resulted in Charlie being in some way killed or hurt, which is like driving me nuts, but I'm hoping to be proved wrong. So I'm going to start out with going through the voice messages that we left for this recording that are more on the side of Lilith.
Hello, my name is Graham. My pronouns are he, him, and I am not the kind of person that goes down fighting. I never have been. I freeze or I fawn so often in my life, staring down the metaphorical barrel of the gun. I've folded before my enemy even shows me it's loaded. In recent years, I've come very far, but I'm still not the kind of person who could be defiant in this scenario. But my older brother is. He's been my hero for that reason, for just about my entire life. He's the person that helped me come out of my shell, that helped me learn to stand up to authority's bullshit. Is he wise? Maybe not. Is he kind of a pain in the ass to live with? Yeah. But I still admire him so much. Out of the two, I have more in common with John than with Arthur. I think that's why I want so badly to choose Lilith here. So Arthur can show John what my older brother showed me. Even when it's stupid, even when it's hopeless, you can still spit in your bully's eye. That indomitable spirit, you know? That's all.
Wonderful message. Really appreciate the vulnerability. I know people in poll chat are always very passionate, but so frequently we get people who are willing to open up and explain why votes mean what they mean to them, even if it is a like personal message that way, and as it isn't technically like a debatable issue. I think it's still really nice to understand where people are coming from and how the story can touch on their emotions and impact their vote.
Absolutely. And I really liked how sweet it was talking about your brother and what kind of a role model or positive influence he's been, even if he can be a pain in the ass. And I think that is very true for a lot of hero figures or role model figures. There's always something, but it's really sweet that you have that. And yeah, just having something to try to emulate and try to push you towards not letting people push you around and try to stand for what you think is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. So we are going to listen to another message.
Hello, my name is Nukuome, my pronouns are he, it. Now getting right into it, ever since the last chapter, I've been really thinking, why is Arthur Lilith's favorite? Now here's my personal theory. I think that Lilith connected to Arthur on a very personal level, and that's why he's her favorite. So Lilith has a technical father who selfishly killed all of his other selves. We don't know if this was before or after Arthur's parents died, but either way, Cain's a very selfish man, and he doesn't care how his actions affect the people around him, namely his daughter Lilith. Now, if Cain isn't lying about Arthur's parents, and they really were cultists, then I think that Lilith would have felt a lot of sympathy for a young boy who was emotionally neglected by both his mother and father. Killing them and dubbing Arthur her favorite could have been her own way of reconciling with her own internal turmoil, as both of them have very self-absorbed parental figures who harm those that they're supposed to be caring for. Sound very familiar? Well, Arthur definitely got his tendencies somewhere. Or it may have been to protect Arthur from whatever his parents were doing with the cult and everything. Maybe they would have planned to sacrifice him like Larson. But regardless, neither of them were doing a good job raising him, and I don't think that they were trying to. But that's another can of theory worms that I can't open right now. The point is, I think Arthur is her favorite because she was able to connect to him on a very personal level. She was able to sympathize with him. Meaning, Arthur isn't special in any way other than that he was just in the right place at the right time.
Wow, thank you so much, Nukuome. That was really fast. It was really fast, but excellent thoughts.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really good question about the timeline, and I have some comments there. I can get into a more in-depth one, but right now I'll just say Arthur's parents died in the early 1900s. So we know Arthur is 34 in 1934, so he was born in 1900. And he was a young boy when they died, so it was early 1900s. Then in 1914 is when the imposter, Edward William Allen, did his portal shenanigans that severed Scratch from Lilith and trapped that piece of her in the house to then start haunting other things. So we know she was trapped by that point. So
Right.
that all happened before Nyarlathotep became Cain, and that occurred in like 1923, 1924 is around the time he got his hands on the Greystone and started hopping around killing other versions of himself. Time travel does come into play since hopping between the keys does let you move around in time as well. And so I don't know how that may have influenced the overall timeline of what Lilith saw regarding Cain killing other versions of Niar and how that may have influenced Lilith. But I think it is a really interesting idea that that may be something she was aware of at the time of Arthur's orphanment. And the idea that that's part of what gives her a connection to him, I think, is really interesting.
I love that. Thank you for breaking that down. That's awesome.
Correct, Graham. Yes, we know that Arthur moved from England to America in about 1917.
Wow.
That's in my more detailed timeline.
Because he was born in 1900, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Wow. Graham says, which makes him definitely draft dodger. He says he was too young, doesn't he?
Yes, I think you're supposed to be like 18 to be drafted.
Got it. Okay. Let's move to another submission. Okay. This is actually an email submission that I'm going to read out. This is a message from Sardothein. It just says, "Hi friends, this is Sardothein on the Discord. Real name is Lindsay. Just a few more thoughts that they've had regarding this week's poll and chapter that they thought could be interesting for Autopsy. So I'm so excited to continue to read more of Sardothein's thoughts. Very eloquent stuff. So this is a Cain vote, but I think it touches on some really good stuff, and we put it in the second part of the episode for a reason. So bear with me. So this was Sardothein saying, a few more reasons why I'm voting Cain. I think we need to remember what Sir Vale said about touching the Blackstone. Arthur now has it in his hand, so isn't it possible that having a lapse in sanity is an additional threat to him at this point? If we choose Lilith, which will inevitably piss Cain off and cause him to follow through on his threats, which I have no doubt he will, especially those about Faroe, couldn't that cause Arthur to then become a grinner? I doubt the little sanity Arthur currently has could withstand seeing his daughter tortured.
Okay, so grinners. Yes, I I see you in there, Graham. I see you. So I'll talk a little bit about grinners. I won't go into extensive detail because I know I've explained them a few times before. But the
Yeah.
idea behind them is that blood on the obelisk, which is Azathoth's prison, or on the Blackstone, can cause this effect that basically puts out like a psychic pulse, and a failure of sanity or will make one subject to the effect. And that effect is something that kind of overrides your humanity and makes you driven towards the more violent and repugnant thoughts that have crossed your mind, even if you never would have acted
Mhm.
on them before. Like, it removes all sense of morality. And it
Right.
also, key point, makes you a drone of Nyarlathotep.
Mm.
So that means presumably a drone of pain, a mindless follower of his will when he chooses to enact that aspect of it. And this is a
I don't like
no,
that.
no, 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 no. This is a huge factor in why I have been determined from the very, very beginning that the Blackstone was brought up to keep this away from Cain as long as possible, whatever way necessary. And this ties back to the Dark World and what I think his ultimate goals are. In the larger Invictus universe, from the very beginning and through every RPG, not just Call of Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu is just a tiny factor in this. There has been this overarching plot regarding the Dark World and an entity that resides within it. And that entity kind of gives the players in the game, it appears, a vision and understanding to a limited degree of the Dark World, and explains that it's an encroachment into this being's space. And its goal is to just eliminate
Mm.
absolutely everything. And the Dark World then is basically all fictional realities, all possible realities. Every time someone comes up with a story or a game, all possible iterations of that become a new parallel world. And those all end up in the Dark World. So Kane used the analogy of a piano when describing under the piano lid is where all of the Call of Cthulhu dark eldritch outer god entities reside. The piano itself is then kind of the dream of Azathoth, and all of the piano keys are the versions of universes that are dreamt up by Azathoth. Now, since that is all based on Call of Cthulhu specifically, and Call of Cthulhu has no interaction or relation to other game systems like the Strange or D&D or the Fate system or whatever else, I think all of those other sets, Deadlands, good one, I think all of those are in this same analogy that Cain is using to explain things to Arthur, completely different instruments in this same orchestra
Mm.
pit that is the Dark World. And I think what Cain wants to do is take all of these things he's collected, the Crimson Stone, which gives power of mind control, the Gray Stone, which gives visions and knowledge, the Black Stone, which makes drones for him, and basically not just try to orchestrate and play his piano, because he said to Arthur in that it's difficult to play or compose a song one note at a time. You're trying to do chords, right?
Yeah.
So my fear is he wants to take the Blackstone and make drones that are basically extensions of himself in every other universe, not just Call of Cthulhu, but absolutely everything, absolutely everywhere throughout, everything that's inhabited in the Dark World. And I don't want that to happen, so I don't want him to get the stone.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Nikki, ever since I met you, I remember you talking about how like your whole thing was that you just did not want Cain to be involved in anything ever. Like, you just didn't want anything to do with Cain, period. So totally shakes out now why you would be so devoted to that principle.
Yes. And I've tried to explain it, like written it out. I've seen people say like listening to me talk about it is helpful. So good.
Yeah.
I have a graphic that I have made. But it's basically a picture that has the piano and a cello and a harp and stuff, and it has different systems on it. It has the Jack Dust symbol marked on everything. Shh, that's a whole other thing we won't get into. It has like a thread weaving through all of it, and the lighter is outside because the lighter is special and exists across different systems, and that's its own whole thing. And that is the dark.
Wow. That's awesome. I think that's interesting because if Cain's whole thing is to maybe make extensions of himself so that he can compose something, I guess that just, I mean, I know that he's the antagonist, so nothing good can come of whatever he wants, but man, am I curious. Man, am I curious to know what he would do if like he got what he wanted.
I'm really curious, but if I'm in the role of the person opposing him, I don't want to let him take it. I am confident it's going to happen anyway.
Of course.
He's going to get it. We're going to see it. But I'm not going to willingly be in the role of handing it to him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you were very determined to make that point this vote. I know that. Okay, I'm going to keep going with Sardothian's message.
Yes.
In that vein, for those who want to / are voting for Lilith in order to stay consistent with Arthur's characterization in the last few chapters, sticking it to the gods, I see you and wholeheartedly agree that we should make a decision to stay consistent with characterization. However, I think it's far more in line with Arthur's character to protect Faro at all costs, rather than continue to be bloody but unbowed. We know how much he loves her and the depths of his guilt over the suffering he caused for her and how he was responsible for her death. The entire reason Arthur is even on this journey now is to try and prevent Cain from bringing her back, just to hurt her. Of course, there are others Arthur cares about, but he cares about Faro the most. Arthur even has said before, back in the windmill episode, that all he and John could think about on this journey was the stick Cain threatened them with, and Cain is truly at the point where he is ready to get that stick out. He is desperate, and that is a terrifying state of mind for him of all people / entities to be in right now. I agree that Cain is likely going to do horrible things no matter what we choose, but I think there is one guaranteed way he is going to do his worst and bring out Faro, and that's by choosing Lilith. Ultimately, I don't know if there is anything that could ever win out over his love for his daughter, not even his desire to not bend to the will of gods. When I think of Arthur, the love he has for Faro is what I think his core value is.
So I did have another thought that I wanted to comment here, and I absolutely agree that love for Faro and not wanting to let her down is central to Arthur's identity and his values. I do also want to say that according to Malum, she is also his hope, and she has forgiven him for what he did that led to her death. And I feel like if she can forgive him for being distracted and letting her come to harm, then she can likely also forgive him for taking an action that may cause harm in an effort to prevent greater harm to more people.
Yeah, I agree. I also think it's really good to see the different ways in which people can make the vote make sense. Like, we all talk about how both options are possible and not out of character. Not one is not more in character than the other, and I think it's really cool to see like multiple perspectives on how both options can work. So I always value understanding like how it could work for Arthur to go either way. I was talking about it in the Discord, like as a writer, the way that I like to plan things is knowing where I need to get the character and then manipulating the environment around them to make them get there, not boxing in what we can and can't do based on what they will and won't do. It's more about like, okay, I need to get from point A to point B, and the solution is going to be dealing with the environment around them to get to point B, not so much changing their character or saying, well, they can't go right because he just doesn't go right. I have to find a way to make him go right. There's no such thing as he won't do that.
Mhm.
I know that Harlan's also talked about that too, where characters are capable of everything.
And I see what you noted, Graham, saying something that swayed someone was the idea that it would be thematically inconsistent to bring Furrow back just for a torture sequence on screen. And anyone who's listened to Divisor knows that Harlan, and also just the fact of Furrow, knows that Harlan doesn't shy away from dark concepts, but when it does come to the audio, I think he can be thoughtful about it and not just
Yeah.
go for like the shock value of it. And I think he understands his audience, and I think he knows how he would handle dealing with that if it were to come up in a way that won't like be harmful to the audience. I also feel like a good possible, I don't want to say out, but maybe that is the right word to use anyway, is the nature of Kane. Like, he'll do what's amusing to him in the moment and what he feels like. He'll change his mind. He might say he'll do something and then not do it. So he might threaten, and he might actually, but I don't think we're going to hear something that most in this show that's like even Divisor level, which I know was too much for some people, but it was still, I think, pretty tame compared to what it could have been. And so just to say, I agree. I don't think he would bring out Furrow torture just to do it and to make a bad story. I think he would go about it in a way that is palatable for the majority of people who are aware of horror concepts and in for a horror story.
Yeah, and I know that we talked about this last on part 1 of this episode, but when you're voting with the idea of like content that you prefer not to engage with, it's just, I mean, that's completely fine. I mean, okay, for example, I would never have listened to Malevolent if I knew that there was death of an animal, like when they have to kill Lily, because that is a hard stop for me usually. That death, no matter what the circumstances are, of just like killing an animal that is, not out of self-defense or anything like that, putting down a dog, any of that kind of stuff, I can't do it. And if somebody had told me like, oh, one of the content warnings for Malevolent is that they kill an animal that is pretty friendly to them, and it's a really sad emotional scene, I would have been like, oh well, unfortunately can't listen to Malevolent, or I might have skipped that episode if I was confident that it wouldn't come up again, and stuff like that, because it really wasn't the soundscaping of an animal dying, it was just the concept of it. So I think when people are worried about Furrow being hurt, I don't even think it's necessarily just the soundscaping. For some people, it is just like the principle of a child being hurt, period, I think is a lot for them. And I'm not saying that is, there's no moral judgment on that. People can handle what they can handle. I do believe that if Harlan is intending to put Furrow in any kind of pain or danger, I think he will do it with taste and tact, because that's how most of his stuff is. And I don't think that Malevolent's strength is the shock value horror. There's definitely shocking horror in Malevolent, but it's not its biggest asset. Yeah. So I doubt that would be like a major aspect.
Yeah, and I strongly suspect, I of course could be wrong, but I strongly suspect that if Kane brings it up at all, it'll be in a way that, he's like, well, I said I was going to do that, but I don't think it'll actually be as fun as I want it to be. I'm going to do this other thing instead or something.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to the next comment here. Final stretch of Sardothein's message. Lastly, though this isn't fully formed and is more just food for thought, but after re-listening to the chapter again, I was reminded of a line that Kane says in Intermezzo. He said, "Hell, even I have a daughter, and you know what? She would love you." This line just hits different after this chapter. When did he know about Arthur being Lilith's favorite? From the way the line is worded, it doesn't sound like he knew at the time of Intermezzo that he was. because Cain said Lilith would love Arthur, not that she did or does. I think this really calls into question Cain's revelation about the circumstances surrounding his parents' deaths, because if Lilith really did cause their deaths, then wouldn't he have known that Arthur was her favorite way earlier? Just an interesting perspective thought that I hope makes sense and we will have to get answered in later episodes. I really just love how this show has been centering around the relationships between two fathers and their daughters and the consequences of those relationships. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I also think that it's highly possible he didn't find out until he
Right.
heard them talking about it
Yeah.
with Yorick around.
I have to say, I'm very curious about
So it might have been a very recent
the
revelation.
way the things he shows Arthur and the exact wording he says. We were talking a little bit about it when we were listening to the episode before the show started. And what do you think about the, I guess, memory or vision or scene that Cain showed Arthur with Lilith and Arthur's parents?
I think it's very interesting. I don't know that we can confidently say that they were cultists of Lilith. It has been a pretty common theory that's been thrown around for a while now that they were cultists. They were involved with Lilith in some way. And also for a very long time, like since Scratch was connected to Lilith in the farm episode, I don't remember exactly which chapter, but when he threw it through, because John had identified somewhat, we figured out from the painting in the farm and then seeing that same person through the portal, okay, that's Lilith. And then Scratch being reunited, it's like, okay, Scratch was a piece of Lilith. Scratch called Arthur his favorite.
Right.
So that might have been a carryover from before Scratch was severed, and Arthur might be Lilith's favorite, in which case that would have been established a long time ago. So that kind of thing has been around for a long time. Her in his bedroom as a young boy being like, oh, you're my favorite. It's like, interesting. Yeah, the way that Cain jumps them around through the house, it is, and I think intentionally, unclear whether it is actually the same
That's a good point.
event or night or not. Arthur might be able to tell just based on that was his
Right.
room. Like, this object was in that place, and I only had it there like the night before I woke up and my parents were dead or something. I don't know. But yeah, so some of it seems to align with a bunch of theories, but it still doesn't really confirm much of anything at this point.
Yeah, and I know that there's good reason to doubt whether or not it's authentic. I don't Can you understand why why Cain would do this? Do you think it's purely just so that Arthur will feel kind of resentment toward Lilith or what?
Why he would show that,
Yeah.
I do think he is trying to kind of, I think someone else used the term poison the well or something, of anything that might be existing between Arthur and Lilith. He knows that his daughter would like Arthur and apparently does. And she's here now, and he is giving Arthur the option, supposedly. He's asking him the question of who he would want to give the
Right.
stone to. And so I think it is to try to push that and say, you have a choice, but isn't that choice awful? You might as well just give it to me and give in to what I asked you in the first place and not connect with her and not see her as a potential ally or an asset or anything positive. She is just as bad as me or worse, and so just don't even think about it.
I just get such a weird feeling about why he did it because to me this is so transparent. Like it doesn't feel I guess it doesn't feel tricky enough to be that straightforward for it to be just like meant to upset Arthur enough to where he would not want to give Lilith the stone. I can't imagine that's it. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm overestimating Cain. I don't know.
I don't know. I do think there is more to it, maybe. Also, I think it's important to note he's made a wager. Cain said when they encountered him, he's made a new wager.
Yeah.
and then jumps into the whole business with the stone and stuff.
Right.
And I am wondering exactly what the nature of that is. Like, if it is related to what Arthur will do. Is there a way to get him to do something that we think he wouldn't or shouldn't?
Interesting.
And so I think the wager might be about who Arthur would choose to give the stone to. And he's trying to make the case as strong as possible for Arthur to give it to him.
Right. Okay. I can see that.
I don't know. That's kind of the stretch I'm making right now.
I'm excited. I'm so excited to see what the fuck is going on. I want answers so bad. Okay. Let's do another voice message.
Hello, hi, this is Pan. I use he, they pronouns, and you're getting my very first autopsy voice message very shortly after I finished episode 259 because I have a lot of thoughts and I'll try and keep it under 90 seconds as best as possible. No promises. Anyways, my whole thoughts revolve around the fact that we got this whole flashback with Lilith and her going back and Arthur's parents dying and her whispering that Arthur is her favorite into it. And I have a lot of thoughts because it makes me think about the timeline of events and fate, I guess you can say, destiny. I don't know. I feel like the disarray is inevitable either way. I feel like we don't have a choice in trying to prevent it, no matter which choice we vote for. I think either way, it's going to turn out that the disarray happens, and it makes me wonder if this entire time Lilith knew that when she called Arthur her favorite when he was only a child, because Cain says, what makes Arthur special? And I'm going totally like tinfoil hat, red string corkboard here, but like she calls Arthur her favorite, which makes me wonder about the timeline and the implications of it. Was it known that this entire time Arthur would be the one to take on the fragment of the king in yellow? And was it known that he was going to be the one to bring on the disarray? And in that case, does that mean that the entire time the gods knew things would happen, like Pharaoh's death and everything like that? Like, what are the implications here? At any point, could some of the tragedies that Arthur has come across been prevented? Could Pharaoh's death have been prevented? Could it have happened that Arthur would not have met John? We'd see all of these different timelines that Cain talks about. And he says, like, oh, all of these other Arthurs failed to get to the point that you're at now. What do they know? What do they know that, with all of this knowledge about all the different timelines? Okay, I'm sorry, that's over 90 seconds. I gotta go. Bye.
Thank you, Pan, for submitting your first autopsy message. I love it. I hope it's not your last. That was great. Breathe though.
Yes, air is important.
Yeah.
That was great. I do have a few thoughts on this, but Graham did say he wanted to note that he thinks it's incredibly relevant that Alia says the day of wrath comes in the form of a pale woman. And Lilith is, of course, described as alabaster skin, which is very pale, about as pale as you can get. And also, yes, I absolutely agree. The disarray is going to happen and has been kind of foretold, but I think the details around it might be a bit more malleable, like exactly how it happens and what all is involved. And Cain definitely knew a lot of things about Arthur, but he doesn't seem to have studied his life and like gone through and lived it across timelines until after he saw John and him join. So I don't know that it was like well before, like even when Arthur was young. I don't know that anybody was around thinking, all right, this guy is going to have a baby that's going to drown and we're going to let that happen because it's going to push him to be a PI in Arkham or he's going to get possessed by the king in yellow. Of course it's possible, but all the interest seemed to happen mostly after that. So I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Wow. My head's like folding over itself.
One other thing I did want to note too here was that I don't know if Lilith has the same freedom of movement between keys throughout her existence that Cain has. Like the exact nature of her versus Nyarlathotep and the other gods and avatars and how all that works for her is a little unclear because it kind of works a little differently for all of them.
Right.
And whether they can move forward and backward in time and that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's something she could have like taken knowledge from the future farther back or visited him previously after she knew certain things or saw certain things happen. I don't know. We just don't have enough of the physics of elder gods at this point.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to play this next voice note. It's a rather long one, so Nikki, if you want to interject at any point, go ahead and ping me in the server.
Okay, I listened to it. I have a few comments that I think will be good just at the
Okay,
end.
then I will just play it through.
Hello, I'm a myth or mythology addict. Pronouns are he, him. And Jesus Christ and his half-siblings, that, it was certainly an episode. It was a lot. I think everyone can agree that was a notable chapter. Arthur's parents were cultists of Lilith, of all eldritch beings. Lilith, wonderful option, gotta say, 10 out of 10 for Danish people. You know, Cain has already established that no matter what we pick, he is going to pick for us, because the last 2 votes, sort of, were both just told, no, fuck you, go back to the milk store, because we said, don't revive Antoine, and don't do it ourselves. Then he revived Antoine and forced us to, he did killed Antoine again and then forced Arthur to do it. So I'm thinking, even if we say Lilith, which is what, the polls did, I feel like he's just gonna say, skill issue, and then just still take it for himself. I have difficulty in seeing Cain, actually giving us the option. And if he does, I would be very, very surprised. I would say rather understandable reasons, right? And also, Yorick, you fucking dumbass. I know he's dead. I am well aware. He is still so fucking stupid. He could have, at any point, literally any point, just said, hey, by the way, yeah, he can hear you from my tooth because of dark magic. I don't know. Don't ask. I don't understand it. He could have just said something in that, but no, he had to be a fucking bastard. And just, oh my days. I find Yorick to have also, Cain just going, I will not, when Arthur asks him to shut the fuck up, is just creme de la creme. It just, past 2 chapters have been so goddamn good. But to the point at hand, I chose Lilith. And I picked Lilith because of the fact that it seems like, if I did not misunderstand Cain's explanation, Arthur exists because of her. And he is her favorite, which leads to her probably giving him, more favorable outcome. Because although I don't think Cain has ever directly lied, truthfulness. So I think the best option, and what I myself voted for, is Lilith. To quote my girlfriend, go get it, girl boss.
Thank you very much, Myth. Appreciate your wonderful submission.
Go get it, girl boss. Hell yeah. So I do think it's very unlikely that Cain will actually allow the Black Stone to go to Lilith. We were asked, who do you want to give it to? And he is definitely still kind of in control of the situation. So we're just answering truthfully. Don't want to give it to you, Cain. So we're not, it isn't a vote of who do we give it to. It'd be nice if it was. But yeah, I think the wording there is important. And in defense of York, I believe he was likely under a very similar condition as John, and also Matthew, the guy under Larson's estate, where he was told by Cain, if you say certain things or give away certain information, you will cease to exist. Or you will get thrown into the dark world in John's case. But, Yorick's already partway in there. So that's not the same threat. So yeah, I think, and also he was asked certain questions and his response was he could not say.
Yeah.
And he has certain limitations, whether that is by, quote, choice, because the alternative is destruction or eternal torture, or some kind of physical barrier based on the nature of vanguards and how they operate. Either way, I think that it probably wasn't as simple as he could have just told them.
Yeah, and I do remember there was a line that Yorick has when he's talking to John and Arthur. I think it's about why they're called the Dies Irae, or maybe something along those lines. And he actually says, I can't. Like,
yes.
And I remember commenting about that on Autopsy and saying, like, it sounds like he physically doesn't have the means to be able to talk about it, which means there's something bigger going on than just him not being allowed to. It's got to be there's some kind of big punishment that he will face if he does. So that checks out to me.
Yeah, or even some kind of like supernatural padlock on certain things. Like they just physically cannot be sound waves out of his physical form,
Right, yeah. I'm going to play this last submission. Actually, I think the
last one's an email.
So this is a message from Apollo. First off, you can hear the desperation in Cain's voice during the last couple of chapters, which I love. Shout out to Harlan's voice acting, but I want to really drill down into that desperation a bit. 1. Recall that Cain became Cain because he realized the possibility of his own death after witnessing Shub. 2. Recall that Yorick said Cain and Lilith are roughly equal in power, which hits differently now that we know Yorick was working for Cain at the time. 3. Recall via Yorick that Cain led Arthur and John to create the Hand of Malevolence in order to use it against Lilith specifically. 4. Recall that Lilith's words are her power, and Cain is intentionally keeping her voiceless, saying he knows better than to let her speak. To me, it felt like Cain was bluffing when he said Lilith wouldn't know what to do with the stone. If it's so inconsequential to him and he's so fine with her getting it, then why bother to freeze her in the magic suppression bubble in the first place,
I have a thought there. So I don't think he's worried about her wanting or getting the stone. I have some points about that I think I'll wait and get into later, but I think his main concern is about what she wants to do to him. And so the point of making the hand to keep her silenced, he said her words are her power. And he's also said, talk to me, kill me, what's the difference? When Arthur was asking about it. So again, I don't think it's about stopping her from getting the stone. I think it's about stopping her from talking to Cain or doing something to Cain with the power of her words.
I am fascinated by the concept that all Lilith has to do is talk to be a threat.
I also think that part of that potential threat, is the influence that those words might have on Arthur. Depending on what she has to say, that might affect what Arthur thinks or what decisions Arthur makes, in addition to whatever physical power it might have of destruction or interfering with Cain.
Right. So then I guess the implication is that her speaking may be not just a technical weapon, but also a means of manipulation manipulation in this case being a neutral word rather than a negative, sort of like, whatever she says is capable of manipulating the outcome of events that could result in Cain dying, I guess.
I think so.
Okay. Interesting. So continuing the message here. And then Cain's actions toward Arthur have also been very telling, like bringing Arthur's parents into it. If he simply wanted to hurt Arthur, he obviously has many other ways to do that. That was a tactic. Even if what Cain presented in that memory was completely true and not just biased narrative with selective omissions, which we cannot know for certain since Lilith is silenced, the fact that Cain chose to reveal this here and now is a form of manipulation in itself. He went out of his way to remind Arthur that Lilith is just as malevolent, TM, of a being as Cain himself, which means he knows Arthur is having doubts about handing over the stone, and is trying to counteract that by painting Lilith in a bad light. He is poisoning the well against Lilith, but why does he feel like he has to? Again, he's indirectly acknowledging Lilith as a threat here. So why the vote? If Cain is really that afraid of Lilith interfering here, then why on earth would he offer us the choice to hand the stone to her? What's the trick here? Think of the last poll. Cain gave us the choice to refuse, but refusing did not have the outcome we thought it would. I've seen people say it wasn't a true choice, but I'd argue that it was, kind of. As in, it was still a choice we got to make, but it wasn't exactly the same choice that was presented on paper or, on Patreon.
I do want to say we never ultimately choose the outcome of anything. We're choosing what what Arthur's and John's action will be, or what their mindset will be, not what happens. Like the vote in the basement or lower level of the windmill. The vote was to go up. He tried to climb up the ladder and it broke. He did not go up. That wasn't a non-vote, or it did not happen. It's just what we voted did not play out the way we expected. And I think it's the same thing here.
Yeah, I agree. We also definitely should have gone up the first time we were asked if we wanted to go up.
Yes.
And we would have gone up if people hadn't fucking thought that the owl had babies. Which, by the way, proved to be not true because it was fucking Lilith. It wasn't a goddamn owl. The owl did not have babies. Sorry. We'll never, ever let that go.
You gotta flush out the building from the top down. That's the safest way to do it.
And we should have, and we didn't.
I don't care if they were babies. Oh well, I want to know. It's too late.
I think the whole course of Malevolent would be different if we had gone up that ladder. I think even maybe we would possibly have Charlie with us on this adventure and everything. Like,
absolutely.
You just, the butterfly effect, it would have just rippled out and continued. I mean, maybe people who died didn't need to die. Maybe the Blackstone wouldn't be in Antoine's chest. Like, we really don't know because we chose to go down the ladder instead of up. I'm just saying.
Junior DeWitt Ackerman would be with us reading us books.
Yeah, maybe Anna Stanchik. Maybe. We don't know. We have no idea. So continuing on with this message. So the wording of this poll could be important. Who do you want to give the stone to? Her or me? It's likely that Arthur won't be able to physically follow through on whatever we choose, like with last week's Don't Do It Yourself. We might not be voting for who actually gets the stone, but rather the rhetorical approach and level of violence that Cain uses thereafter. To me, this seems like a choice about consequences. Choose your punishment. Pick your poison, Artie. Speaking of which, I also posit that Cain's whole performance with Antoine, bringing out the stick by threatening Arthur's loved ones, etc., was just that, a performance.
Every time we see Cain, he is in full performance mode. Everything he does in Arthur's presence is a performance. How much of it is pure mask and how much he lets the truth of his emotions bleed through now and then varies, but it is all a show. Absolutely. 100% agree.
Something that I have been saying is when Cain is on screen, it's about Cain. It's not about anyone else. Everyone else is a distraction. Everyone else is playing like a chess piece on the board. Cain really dominates the narrative, which is part of why he's not around very much, because then it would be the Cain show. And you can't have that. But I do think that Cain is and always will be the most important character when he is in the narrative, like as an active role, rather than like the passive backseat. And so he has to, I mean, that power over the narrative comes with a lot of grandiosity, I guess. And I think it totally makes sense for him to be performing. Moving on. Last week's vote was a test of sorts, a chance for Cain to determine which method of persuasion works better on Arthur, the carrot or the stick. Coercion, I tend to make an awful mess, didn't convince Arthur last week. This week, we'll get to see if intimidation does. Kane is trying all these different approaches to get Arthur to hand over the Blackstone willingly, but there remains the obvious question of why an all-powerful being like Kane can't just take the Blackstone himself. There's something there. For some reason, Kane still needs Arthur's compliance.
So there are a few possibilities here. One of them is it could be related to the wager, and he's kind of hands off, leaving it to see what Arthur will choose to do with his human free will.
Mm-hmm.
The other possibility is the nature of the stones themselves. So the way these were created, they were created by other outer gods and were designed, so to speak, to intentionally be invisible, be blind spots, unfindable by all of the outer gods and eldritch beings, particularly Nyarlathotep, because none of the others want Azathoth to wake up, and they want to keep him in prison, whatever. So they intentionally made this convoluted thing, this big object, these 3 items that have to be assembled with it to be the keys, do a ritual before any of that can happen, and make them invisible. And we know that Kane has acquired them, but he's acquired them through other people. Cults, he's hired folks. He hired the butcher, literally, gave him money to bring him shit. And so that has always been a matter of exchange. They have been people working for him, bringing these things to him. So while we've never seen the handoff in person. We've seen the aftermath of some of them. And so there's some question of whether once it's in his presence and he can physically see it, that he can just take it, or if part of those layers of protection that have been put on them in their creation by the other powerful entities that are equal to or more powerful than Cain is, if there is an element in that baked in that it has to be willingly handed over.
I know I just kind of like nodded and said yeah and went along with everything you just said, but can you back the fuck up and explain to me what you meant by he hired the butcher?
Okay, so this is spoilers for Witch's Mark. Sorry. So the Call of Cthulhu Witch's Mark campaign, it's 3 episodes, and the convoluted breakdown is somebody was aware of the Crimson Stone. They wanted to bring it to it was found in a dig, and the person that Cain was impersonating, so Cain hired someone to bring it into Arkham, to bring it to him. One of the senators hired the butcher to steal it for himself because he heard that it was some valuable thing coming and he wanted it because it was valuable. So he hired the butcher to steal it. And then that made Cain super fucking pissed off. And so he hired the butcher to kidnap someone in a threat to force an exchange.
Okay.
Some people question why he didn't just have the butcher go and re-steal the briefcase with the stone. I argue he couldn't know where it was.
Right.
The butcher works very specific. He's not gonna like hunt things down. You tell him what, who, where, when he's on it. You tell him find this object that some rich guy could have absolutely fucking anywhere. No. So yes, kidnap to blackmail to return the item. There we go.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
And I see Graham said you might want to use names to avoid confusion. I will say, like, because I know this isn't what this episode is about, but the storyline of Witch's Mark was very briefly described by Arthur to Marie in where he's talking to her and gets the directive to go talk to Oscar. Go track down Oscar.
Whoever that is.
So the story that he tells her and then elaborates on with John. And then also the story that it's the same story that the butcher and Arthur talk about going down the apartment stairs to the basement in the butcher episode. The stone doesn't come up very directly, but yeah. Cain hired the butcher to kidnap someone to blackmail someone else for the Crimson Stone. Oh, and just real quick, yes, it was Nyarlathotep. It was Bree Kane.
Okay, got it. I'm going to finish reading this note. So that's a weak point we can choose to press now by refusing Kane, but doing so can and probably will make things a lot worse for Arthur and John and everyone else. Kane is desperate, but he will be crueler because he is desperate, and so pushing back against his demands here may not be the best idea in terms of self-preservation. Physical self-preservation is out the window already with no one's getting out of this alive. I'm talking about mental self-preservation going forward. At any rate, I don't think Kane's fear of Lilith is something that we should act on prematurely. Lilith is basically paralyzed at the moment. Better to regroup and live to exploit that weakness another day when we actually stand a chance of winning. So I want to say that, yes, we got a lot of Kane messages. That's not my fault. Nicky, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I have a few things. I will try to be really quick. So, people had mentioned timeline. I'll just do a really brief overview there. Like I said, Arthur was born in 1900. We see Lilith at his bedside when he was a young boy. Then she was trapped, theoretically, and then she was severed, with Scratch stuck in the house and her still stuck wherever she was stuck. Some say Dark World. I don't know. I think maybe somewhere else. 1917, Arthur moves to America, so Lilith's already trapped and severed. 1921 is when the Nyarlathotep avatar in the Malevolent universe witnessed Shub's demise and was fucking shook and decided to become Kane. 1923, the Greystone gets to Arkham, and around 1923-24, Kane gets his hands on it after tracking down the kid that tried to hide it. And then he starts to go around and kill all the other versions of himself. Malevolent starts. Kane gets curious about Arthur and starts investigating him. Then on the night of December 6th, John sees a figure in the ceiling. Then they have the nightmare and free Scratch. The next afternoon, Scratch possessing Hattie frees Arthur, and he then goes on to the farm that night and reunites the Scratch fragment with Lilith, potentially also setting her free since, hey, look, there's a portal. And then the next day is when John and Arthur get told, get the Blackstone for me, and I will give you these things, or I will do these terrible things. That was not a deal. It was a request with caveats. Then they got shoved into the past and were immediately met with an owl that turns out to have been Lilith, who supposedly got there shortly before them, and follows her along. Lilith tells Mother Darkness to leave them alone. She continues to follow them along, puts Alia to sleep, puts Antoine in a dream when he's about to die, meets Arthur in person at the fire, trying to talk him into getting her the stone, does a dream and then physical manipulation, trying to get Kane. Then we have our whole finale sequence. Now, the significant thing I think about the whole situation with the Lilith confrontation is Arthur keeps calling out that she doesn't seem to believe what she's saying. Mother Darkness didn't seem convinced of what she said Lilith's plans were. There's a bunch of uncertainty around that. And ultimately, when she thought that Arthur had access to the Blackstone, she didn't want it. She didn't ask for it. She didn't rush to grab it. She didn't say, give it to me. She said, where is he? She didn't care about the stone. She cared about what Arthur having the stone in his hands would bring.
Right.
Kane. So that's a big argument that I have against folks saying that why would we give Lilith the stone when she wants it? Because I don't think she actually does. And another thing I think is really important to point out is that in the episode, while she can't talk, she is communicating as intensely as she possibly can with her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
John is talking about how she is staring at them with intensity and a pleading gaze. And the context of that is Cain is trying to have Arthur get the stone and give it to him. What would she be pleading? Don't give him the stone. Then after the little field trip into Arthur's past and the things that Cain said about her and her involvement, potentially in an effort to make Arthur think of her as a visceral, like, enemy, like to the core of himself, why bring up something so fresh and such a deep cut right at that moment, right before you ask to hand it over?
Right.
Because he wants to eliminate the possibility of that being an option. And her eyes at that point are full of rage and tears because there's something else going on that she has no ability to clarify or expand on. There's been speculation. I've seen other people speculate about it too. But one of the first things that came to my mind was, if they were cultists and she did kill them and he is her favorite, could it have been that she killed them to protect him
Right.
from falling under the influence or being a sacrifice or something along those lines?
Yeah.
So Apollo says the rage and tears are directed at Arthur and John. I don't know that the rage is directed at them. The gaze is directed at them. The emotion might not be, if that makes sense. Like, she's definitely trying to hold eye contact. She's trying to hold their attention and communicate. I believe she's experiencing an emotion about the situation, not about them personally.
Right.
I could be wrong. She might be mad at them. I don't know what she would be mad at them about in that time that she wasn't before.
No, I think it makes sense.
Yes, Apollo. She is emoting loudly in their direction.
she's going on a face journey. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But again, we don't have confirmation. These are inferences based on the context that we do have, and I guess some personal biases.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think those are the big things. I could probably elaborate more on a few things here and there. I do want to say that there were a lot of people talking about a spite vote and just spitting in Cain's eye and saying no just to say no and stuff like that. And while that may be where some people were coming from, that is not where I was coming from. And I'm sure there were others as well. That it wasn't about saying no. For me, voting for Lilith was not about saying no just to say no. It was about legitimately thinking that Lilith is not equal to Cain. I don't think that she necessarily will get the stone or be able to do anything with it. But I do think she has some positive, albeit inhuman because she's not human, affection for Arthur. From the very first moment we met Cain, we learned about Lilith and that she might be helping Arthur. Because Cain said, as he was trying to figure out what made Arthur special, he said, maybe someone's just fucking with me. And then name drops Lilith. So it hasn't been out of the blue that she might actually be somehow a positive force, even if there are some like inhuman effects. And yes, she put Alia in a dream sleep. She doesn't have a human perspective, but I don't think that makes her as bad as Cain. And like I said before, it's not just about saying no just to say no. It's for me about, I do think there is potential that Lilith is an ally, and she is who I would want to give the stone to over Cain, who I believe has the worst intentions in his quest to be the conductor of all of the instruments in the Dark World Orchestra Pit.
I get that. I can see that perspective. Because this is the Lilith second part of the episode, I'm not even going to argue about it. I'm gonna be good, and I'm gonna just let that be there.
I I know you have very different perspective.
It's okay. It's totally fine. I think it is also, this vote was very dependent on how people felt about Lilith, because it really comes down to how much you understand about her character, how much you care about her character, if you have hope for certain outcomes regarding Lilith. And for me, like, it just, she's never been a draw. I've not formed a curiosity or an attachment to the idea of Lilith yet. I know Cain more than Lilith, and for me that was always like, I struggle to fit the pieces together as far as like why I would give the stone to Lilith when the consequences for doing so seem so much worse than otherwise, because I'm not familiar with her in the way that I am familiar with Cain. But I also understand that, like, Cain is the antagonist of the story, and usually giving in to the antagonist is a bad thing you don't want to do. So I mean, it really, I really genuinely, as much as I have a preference and I do have like an opinion about it, I do think that it can go both ways. I can see it very clearly.
And I also completely understand the Cain side. Like, if I didn't have the additional background that I do in the Invictus lore, that Malevolent is a continuation of and just steeped in, I don't know that I would vote the same. But from the moment Cain mentioned, I want the Blackstone, I was like, no.
Yeah.
But regarding Lilith, even like she hasn't shown up or been mentioned in any of the Invictus stuff, but in Mythos, she does exist as an entity, as Nyarlathotep's child, and as an entity that opposes him. Sure, she might still also be evil and do bad things, but she is notoriously an antagonist to Nyarlathotep.
Got it.
And so that being a factor in the way she's being presented here, I know Harlan does his own thing with Mythos stuff, but he does at least loosely follow it for the most part.
Yeah.
Her being against him and whatever it is he's trying to do just fits right in and makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So V asked about hope for the future. Any words of hope for the Lilith outcome? So first, I think I will defer and see, Queen, if you have anything else you want to cover.
The thing I want to cover is I miss my wonderful detective, and I'm so scared that this vote killed him. And I want you to tell me that that's not going to happen, Nikki. I want you to tell me I'm wrong and you didn't vote to kill my man.
I love Charlie too. I cannot take the crown from you as Charlie's #1 fan, but do know I do love him as well. I don't think that we have doomed Charlie with this vote.
Okay.
I do think Cain is going to be angry, which I was well prepared for, and I think all Lilith voters were. He's going to get some kind of retribution, but I expect he's going to decide that the stick he threatened is just not fun, because the stone is there. I believe he is going to end up with it and have a way to get it. And that is going to be much more intriguing and exciting for him, to keep him distracted with bothering with Arthur for too long. Yes, he has fun tormenting Arthur, but he has had these plans for a long time.
Yeah.
He had original plans for it that he had spent like all of human history trying to get all these things together to wake Azathoth, and then his mind got changed of exactly how he was going to go about things, and I believe that included changing his plans. So Arthur is just a small fragment, yes, a fascinating one, but just a tiny fragment in his long history of trying to get his grubby little mitts on this motherfucking rock. I think the excitement of that and finally being able to do the things he has been trying to is going to outweigh and quickly override any distraction of tormenting Arthur. So I don't think he's going to do as much as he's threatened. I think he's got more exciting things to spend his time on now.
Right. That does make me feel a little bit better. Thank you. I won't doom all Lilith voters to a cold shoulder.
I appreciate that on our behalf.
But yeah, anything else that you want to add, or any predictions you want to make about what's going to happen tomorrow?
Oh my gosh, it comes out tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
My heart. I'm very excited. I predict Kane will be fucking furious. I expect to get some description of Lilith's face and her expression. And I think there will be some level of gratefulness in it. I know that we have a fragment of Lilith that has been absorbed into Arthur.
Oh yeah, Arthur like slurped that shit up. I forgot.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about how him saying that he wants to give it to Lilith, even though Lilith is like over there, how having that fragment of her in the hands that are holding the rock, what effect that might have.
Interesting.
And then, we'll see what Kane does. I think that we have been told there will be a Dark World arc. I don't know if that's going to be the entirety of season 6, but I think it could be. And so I think that either that's going to happen like at the end of 260 or in whatever the interstitial ends up being. That might be what gets them tossed into the Dark World, or that might be where they like wake up in it and try like figure out what the fuck, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I'm really excited about what that might hold. I had a plan to try to get through the entire RPG backlog of the Invictus stream before we get to the Dark World, just so I could have all of that in my brain. I'm about 130 episodes shy, but that means I do have around 250 episodes done.
It's amazing. That is genuinely such an incredible feat.
I got a little distracted with some Ain't Slayed Nobody. I am a combination of ashamed and fine with it. Because Ain't Slayed Nobody's good.
Nikki, you are such a delight. I'm so happy that you are such a friend of Autopsy as an editor and just like my friend in general. You're so sweet and so smart.
Aww.
And I really appreciate your time tonight covering all of this stuff.
Oh, well, thank you for having me and letting me talk about Lilith. And the Dark World.
Yes, and the Dark World. I hope that you are right, and I hope that your predictions all come true and that Charlie remains alive.
Yes. At least one of him.
At least one. I wouldn't be mad if we got to meet like multiple Charlies. That would be ideal, in fact. But one, I'll settle for one.
An entire PI office of Charlie's.
Don't even tease me, because that...
So one of the last Invictus Stream episodes that I watched was 3 Sherlock Holmes and a Vampire.
Oh my god.
So same idea, but Charlie Dowd.
Yeah. 3 Charlie Dowds and, I mean, metaphorical vampire in this scenario, I guess.
And a Gug.
And a Gug. It's very good. All right. Nikki, the horrors persist.
But so do we.
Thank you, of course, to Harlan Guthrie, the sole creator of Malevolent. You can find everything official at linktree/Harlan Guthrie. Without his labor of love for a story he wants to tell, we wouldn't be here. And speaking of here, if you want to be part of the live vote chat I record each week, join the Invictus Patreon and connect your Discord account. We have our own private patrons-only autopsy channel. If you want to chat with me and maybe even some other folks you hear from on the show, you can also find a public autopsy channel from the Invictus Discord so you can hang out even if you're not a patron. While Malevolent Autopsy is my pride and joy, it wouldn't be ever improving without some key players. Thank you to Mizra, Nicky, and Vol Control for their work editing and assisting with production. They do so much for the show, and they do it all as volunteers, and I couldn't be more grateful. To submit a voice recording, have your message read aloud on the show, or find us on other platforms, visit linktree/Malevolent Autopsy. Let's hear from one more Malevolent fan before we finish this week.
Hello, loves. Ocelli here. Malevolent has inspired me to create many smaller things, like sketches or drabbles. However, recently I put together an Arthur Lester cosplay for a local con and an Invictus Con once I learned that that was happening much later. Before then, it had been about 3 years since I had put together a cosplay, which is quite sad considering that it is my favorite hobby and is probably my favorite way that I express my personal creativity. As with most things, it was put together relatively last minute. Despite having decided on cosplaying Malevolent soon after starting the podcast about a year ago. However, when I put on the completed outfit and finished that extra challenge of trying to do scar makeup, I couldn't help but squeal with excitement. I was proud of myself for completing a project like that, and it was amazing to meet other Malevolent lovers at con when I was recognized in that cosplay. So thank you to Harlan and the Malevolent community for continuing to be a creative inspiration to me, and I hope your own creative projects are fueled by this beautiful podcast. Have a good day, evening, or night.
I'm your host, Queen, and I'll see you next week. The horrors persist, but so do we.